So today we'll be looking at Genesis chapter 9 as we continually move on to Genesis. And the title of the message today is Don't Worry My Child, Things Will Be Okay. The Assurance of Who God Is. I remember mentioning to you my experience before in Turkey, getting that Turkish massage. But really, in life, there are a lot of things that could happen to you that's very traumatic. Something that would happen to you that you would never forget. Some people, the moment that they find out that they have they're terminally ill, they have a sickness that cannot be cured, man, that's life-changing. It's monumental. It's unforgettable. Or for some people, it could be the day that they found out that their spouse is cheating on them, that the husband or the wife has another family. Well, those are painful experiences that you would never forget. These are things that will keep a wound, that will scar you for life. Being tortured or whatnot. And as we were saying, Noah, when he experienced this great flood, it was something that wounded his soul. That flood wounded him, not physically, but emotionally, mentally. The mere fact that when he stepped out of the ark, the whole civilization has been wiped out. Nothing was left. This was like a Holocaust. Nothing can compare to it. It was a unique experience that he would never forget for the rest of his life. He would tell this story to his grandkids, his great-grandkids, how the whole world was wiped out. That's probably the reason why in our passage today, God repeats. He repeats a promise to Noah. In chapter 6, he said, I'm going to establish a covenant. In chapter 8, he says it again, I will never again curse the ground on account of men, for the intent of man's heart is evil from youth, and I will never again destroy everything as I have done. And yet in chapter 9, he reiterates the promise again, over and over. And he is reiterating the promise not for the sake of God, but for the sake of Noah. Noah needed to hear that. Noah needed to hear the assurance that this calamity that lasted for 1 year and 11 days in the ark will never happen again. It wounded his soul. And God, over and over, was telling him from chapter 6 to chapter 8 to chapter 9, I will never again destroy the whole world by flood. I can imagine, maybe the next time that it rains, Noah would say to the wife, hey honey, come on, let's run back to the ark. Or if I was in the case, if I was in if I was Noah, chances are the ark will always be in my sight. I will not get away too far from the ark. Kasi baka umulan and I know what happens when it rains. Everybody who's out there will certainly die. It's now like a security blanket, seeing that ark, that if ever God gets mad, if ever I sin again, who knows, it might rain again. And we'll all be dead. Good thing I don't have to build it, it's there. I just need to run. And you know what I noticed? I noticed something interesting in this story of Noah and of Genesis. You remember in Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, it says, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. Remember that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2? And we said that water at that time symbolizes what? Chaos. And here in chapter 7, we see chaos. Via what? By the water too. By the great flood. So there's a similarity between what was happening in Genesis chapter 1 when God created the universe and what's happening now. It started with a chaos. And what did God do in Genesis chapter 1? He habitated. He assigns functions and told the functionaries to function. Trees were growing, right? Plants was growing. Here in Noah's ark, what happened after the flood? Noah had to send what? The birds out to check if the plants was growing again. And indeed, eventually, plants was growing again. After that, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, what did God say? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. What did God say in Genesis chapter 9, verse 1 to Noah when he stepped out of the ark? Exactly the same. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Do you see, it's kind of the same, right? Then what does he tell him after he says that? He brings them to the garden, to Eden, right? And what does he say? You can eat of every fruit except the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And here in chapter 9 last week, what did we learn? What did God tell Noah? You can eat of every animal. But there's only one prohibition also. Make sure it's dead, that there is no blood. So there is a similarity. It's almost like a recreation. God was telling the story again of Adam and Eve now through Noah. Now the sad part is this. You know what happened in chapter 3, right? At the Garden of Eden. What happened? Adam and Eve sinned. What happened here in chapter 9? And we'll learn this next week. Noah sinned. Oh, that's sad. It's the same pattern. It's almost identical. How God showed great mercy and love to Adam and Eve and now to Noah. He showed great blessings that they can eat of every tree, that he can eat of every animal and tree. And yet, despite that, God gave one prohibition and Adam and Eve sinned. And here, we'll learn next week that Noah sinned. Almost the same pattern. But before that, we look at chapter 9, verse 8 to 17. And we look at verse 8. It says, And God spoke to Noah and to his sons and said to him, Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, and all of that comes out of the ark, and even every beast of the earth. Verse 11, I establish my covenant with you, and all the flesh shall never again cut off by the waters of the flood, neither shall there again be flood to destroy the earth. You know, you and I know that water is critical to man's survival. Even our own body is composed of what? 90% of our body is water. Even the face of the earth, the surface of the earth, I think 60 or 70% of it is water. And for life to be sustained here on planet Earth, water is needed. Meaning what? It will rain. Rain will come again. If there was no rain, then there will be drought. A lot of people will die if there's a drought. I remember in Bible times when they say there's a famine, there's a drought, lots of people die. But the thing here, remember, when it rained in flood, it's the first rain ever. Now, the thing is, we know water is important, and we know that it will rain again. But Noah does not know that. He does not know. He maybe thought maybe this rain was a one-time, big-time thing. Right? Who knows? All he knew, in his first 600 years, it never rained. It rained once, and it was devastating. But the thing is, God knows, to sustain this world, it needs to rain. The plants needs to grow. And if you tell Noah, hey Noah, I want to ask you something. Tell me, what do you think about rain? Oh, that question would stop his heart. What? Rain? I mean, it's almost like telling somebody, hey, tell me about how it felt to be tortured. It was a traumatic experience. He would say, man, I was in the boat for a year and 11 days. I was with animals. They were noisy, they were stinky, and it was raining cats and dogs. And when we left the ark, I saw the whole world annihilated. I've never seen such great devastation in my life. That thought of rain to Noah is, it would send shivers up his spine. And God knows the fears of Noah. He knows, even though Noah has not verbalized the fear, God knows it. That's why God can read the mind of Noah. That's why over and over he's saying, I make this promise to you. From chapter 6 to chapter 8 and now to chapter 9, God is making a promise that I will never do this again, because He knows that the moment it rains, it will send shivers, because it will rain up the spine of Noah. But God said, I'll never destroy the world by this universal flood again. Don't worry. And in verse 9, when God spoke that, the Hebrew there is emphatic. He was emphatic in telling Noah, Noah, behold, I am establishing my covenant. He was emphatic. He was always like going, Noah, don't worry. I am establishing it. I am establishing my promise to you. Rain will no longer mean imminent disaster. And sabi niya, I'm making this covenant. The thing nowadays is, people, we're not familiar with what covenants are. The closest concept we have with covenants is marriage. Something that is binding.